Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. We begin our video with a story in which our OP got into an unpleasant situation with badly brought up children. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Excuse me, your kids are dropping things on people's heads. I'm not in a standard retail job, but I've worked for about 2.5 years in an interactive science museum that has a lot of activities for children. I spend my days doing science presentations and bringing people into our butterfly house, among other things like controlling the crowds. We get a lot of summer camps. This actually happened a couple of months ago. Some parents, as we know, like to bring their kids to staff members and leave them to be babysat while they sit on their phones or wander away. This isn't actually a bad thing in my workplace, most of the time, because our job is to entertain and teach people about science, but in this case, of course, the two children had to be nightmares. I was staffing the Just for Tots area, only kids under 45 inches tall, helper older siblings, and parents. When my coworker was relieved from her position at the tide pool and walked over to me before she left. I just wanted to let you know those two little blonde boys, she said as she pointed back to the tide pool, have been really problematic. Throwing sand, splashing, squishing animals, just generally being pains. Their mom's sitting over there on her phone. Just keep an eye on them. Unfortunately, the boys got bored of the tide pools and made a beeline for me at Tots. They were in matching black tracksuit-looking outfits with flames on the pants. The younger boy was short enough to go in, so I was forced to allow the older boy in as well as the helper. However, we do have a rule that parents have to stay with their kids, so I had to get the mom to leave her bench outside to follow them into the area. Of course, she sat away from them on her phone again. Checking on them periodically, I noticed that the older boy is taking toys from toddlers and just generally being a pain, and little brother is just copying him. They end up in what's basically a really short castle turret, probably 4 to 5 feet up some stairs from the floor. The turret has walls, but they aren't tall enough to keep the older boy from leaning over them. In the turret, we essentially have giant foam Legos that kids can build stuff with. But Nightmare Child decides it'd be more fun to pick the blocks up and start chucking them over the railing at guests walking by below, outside of the Tots area. I walked over outside the turret and looked through the bars at him. The height of the turret put him only a little above my eye level. You need to stop that. Those blocks need to stay up there. He just stares down at me, then picks up another block and lifts it up to the railing, all while maintaining eye contact. Put that down, I told him. You aren't allowed to lift that above the bar anymore. He ignores me and drops it over. Of course, then he grins at me, turns around and picks up another one. I glanced over to see that Mom was sitting there, completely oblivious. Do you want me to tell your mom that you're doing this? He pauses, looks mildly concerned for a minute. Little brother keeps chucking blocks. She isn't my mom. I don't even know her. Well, I heard them calling her mom earlier and walking with her to the bathroom, so I responded with, "Oh, are you and your brother lost then? I can call someone for you." I made a show of grabbing my walkie-talkie radio from my belt. No! And despite getting caught, the kid full-on throws the last block over the bar at me before grabbing his little brother and running down the steps over to Mom. Starts talking to her and pointing at me, and they all get up and leave. As the mother passes me, she glares and calls me a bee. Seriously, what kind of person teaches their children that it's okay to act this way and lie about everything to people in charge? They must not have any rules at home, therefore think that rules in general don't apply to them. I feel sorry for whoever teaches them at school. And our second story. Please take a $3,000 hit on your car because I'm a liar. So about a year ago, I decided to sell my car to fund a year-long trip across Europe. It was a bit of an older car, about 8 years old, but it had really low miles and an amazing care and maintenance record, so I knew what it was worth. The black book, blue book, some color book, value of a car of that model with so few miles was around $7,500, and I just dumped a fair amount of money into it to get it into top shape, new muffler, brakes, etc., so I listed it for $6,000, which I figured was a fair price. As with any private sale, I had my fair share of people coming to see the car, kick the tires, and then not commit to a sale, but I never got any insultingly low offers until this one lady, let's call her Denise. Denise emailed me from my ad at about 8 p.m. one night. I was just finishing up my last university finals ever, so I was in the middle of studying. Denise asks if she can come see the car. I told her, yes, I'll be home all evening tomorrow after my exam. Feel free to come then, and I'll text her the address in the morning. I guess the website I listed the car under shows the seller's postal code, but not entire address. So when I get a knock on my door at about 9:30 that same night from a lady and her son who introduced herself as Denise, I can only assume that she looked up the postal code and drove through my neighborhood to find the driveway with this specific car in it. She asked if she can test drive it now. I was a little taken aback at how brazen she was, but not wanting to turn down a potential buyer, I said sure and asked to hang on to her driver's license for security. Denise was not happy about this and asked if I was accusing her of being a thief. I tried to explain that I wasn't going to let someone test drive the equivalent of several $1,000s without ensuring they would return it. She huffed a bit, handed me her license, and I handed her a spare key and asked her to limit the test drive to 20 minutes as it was getting late and I had an exam the next morning. Denise drove my car for 2 hours. When she returned it, the half tank of gas I had left in it was nearly gone. I had half a mind to call the police after the first hour and a half, but she brought it back just as I was considering picking up the phone. After getting out and me meeting her outside in my pajamas and slippers, she asked if I would bump off $500 for a small scratch down the side. I said no, since the car was older and it was expected wear and tear for a car that age. She huffed a bit again and said, well, before I buy anything, I want to take it to a mechanic. This was okay with me, but I gave her the receipts and reports from the shop from when I had work done the week before to save her some money. She looked at me and said, what? You aren't going to pay for me to have it inspected? No, because I literally had it inspected last week. She said, well, I'll just take it to my brother-in-law. He's really good with cars. I then told her that I would not accept estimates of the car's value from anyone but an actual credible mechanic. She looked at me weird and said, you're not making me want to purchase from you. I told her the car's value speaks for itself. If she wanted to take the car to a mechanic to contact me tomorrow evening, I was too tired for any more of this. The next day, I got another email from Denise. In the email, she said something like the following. Your price on that car is too greedy. The brakes are soft and squeal, the muffler's too loud, the radio doesn't work, there are scratches and rust everywhere. My son found a dead mouse under the hood. You're a little girl and there's no way your car is worth as much as you say. I was 24 years old and I didn't evaluate the car, a professional did. You will never get your asking price, so I will offer you $2,500, no more. I didn't respond, and interestingly enough, my junker sold the next day for my entire asking price. A week later, I received another email from Denise that just said, $3,000 final offer, but you're responsible for repairs needed in the next year. I got the satisfaction of telling her my car indeed sold for double her generous offer, and good luck haggling her next purchase. The sale of that car financed a great year in Europe. And our last story. Never mess with an elderly woman. This story's not mine, but a story I found out about 7 years ago about an elderly woman named Venus Green. I looked into personal information, and trust me, you can find this on WBAL TV 11. Let me fill you guys in. Venus Green is a 90-year-old elderly woman who lived in Baltimore. In 2009, Green's grandson, Tally, was shot and wounded. Tally said he was shot at a convenience store. However, the police back then insisted it happened in the household and were determined to find Green guilty. The police then proceeded to interrogate Tally while he was bleeding. Yes, he was bleeding, and not letting emergency services near him. Tally's wound needed attention, but he wasn't let to be treated until Green stood up and firmly told the officers to let the attendant treat him. You people thought this is it? Nope. 3 years later, a Baltimore police officer showed up at Green's home demanding to let him in. Green, of course, refused as he didn't have a warrant for a house search. She knew her rights. Green was about to close the door when the officer said, "Oh, you did it. Come on, let's go inside. I'll prove where that blood is. You did it." Before forcefully opening the door, Green, getting agitated, began to tell the officer that the scene never happened in her home, but the officer was very adamant, saying aggressively, "I'm going to find that gun. I'm going to prove that you did it." Green attempted to make the officer leave, then a struggle ensued. The officer then dragged Green, shoved her into a chair, and handcuffed her while continuously calling her a B. Green had enough of the officer barging into her home unannounced and decided to take matters into her own hands. When the officer opened the basement door, Green immediately got up and kicked the officer going down the stairs. The officer tumbled on the stairs. She quickly locked the officer inside the basement. The officer started banging on her door to let him out while ranting about the charges he's going to arrest her for. Green just said nothing and left the officer in the basement. The officer continued shouting and then stopped. An hour later, 2 police officers showed up at Green's house and arrested her on charges of assaulting an officer and other charges. The officer, it turns out, twisted his ankle and needed to stay off patrol for a few weeks. The charges were later dropped, and the police department apologized. That ain't it. Green had suffered a shoulder separation, violated rights, and was assaulted by the officer of the law. She ain't gonna stay quiet until she gets her revenge. To add more to the injury of the Baltimore PD, Green sued the whole department. Court details are not found, but Green got the settlement for $95,000. The whole city supported her, and some of the council decided to talk about the PD's behavior, and consequences were set. As for the officer who barged into her home, he was fired, but he was known to be hated by the community, as he recently was also unnecessarily checking items at home without a warrant and unlawful arrests. The guy's going to have a hard time getting a job. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.